Good afternoon, folks. Thank you so much for your attendance here at this very important event for the City of Winston-Salem. My name is Steve Strauss, and I'm with Developmental Associates. We are the firm that recruited these candidates, as well as many others. They went through a very intensive process to get to this point here today, including 4 exercises. One was a written exercise where they had to develop a plan of action for how they would respond to some key challenges with the City of Winston-Salem. They had a coaching role play where they demonstrated their supervisory skills. They ran a simulated community meeting where we got to see how well they could interact with the public and deal with critical crime and other problem-solving issues. And they all, each of them had a presentation as well. Each of these exercises were assessed by folks that were trained on how to objectively evaluate the candidates. Each exercise had some community members from Winston-Salem participating, at least one of whom I see in the audience here today. And we also had some police chiefs from the region who helped evaluate those exercises. Both these candidates, I can tell you, are outstanding talents. They're very capable of doing this job. Key question at this point is how well they're going to fit with the City of Winston-Salem and with the community. And this is an opportunity for you all to find out a little bit more about these candidates and that fit. So on my far right is Katrina Thompson. She is an assistant chief with the Winston-Salem Police Department. And she will be introducing herself in just a moment. And to my near right is Cam Selvi, who's a commander with the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department. I'm going to ask for each one of them to make a presentation to you for up to about 5 minutes. And then after each one of them has done so, we're going to field questions. I have a series of questions that have already been sent in. I'll start by asking those. I think there are about 10 of them, and if we get through them all, then we'll have an opportunity for the members of the public to ask questions as well. So we'll go ahead and proceed as follows. So Commander Selvi, if you'd like to start and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Dr. Strauss. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for being here. I know this is a very important decision for this community and this police department. I want to tell you that a lot of people have asked me about my history and what I bring to the table. So I've been with the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department for almost 26 years. I spent about 15 of those years in patrol as a patrol officer, patrol sergeant, division captain, and then a bureau major. I've also spent 2 stints in internal affairs, once as a captain and once as the commander of internal affairs, and I'm on my second time around as the commander of the Criminal Investigations Bureau. And in Charlotte, what that entails is homicide, armed robbery unit, sexual assault, missing persons, financial crimes, cyber crimes, domestic violence, and crimes against children. I always have to make sure I don't leave anybody out. People have asked me over the past week, what is it about Winston-Salem and why do I want to be a police chief and be a police chief here? I made a personal goal several years ago to be a police chief, something that I've really been interested in, but I haven't gone around and thrown my name in the hat in every opening that's out there. I've really been deliberate about looking for the right fit. And by the right fit, I mean the right fit for the community and the department. I want to make sure I'm the right fit. I also want to make sure that the community and the department is the right fit for me. This was a family decision. I didn't make this decision in a vacuum. I've been married for 22 years to my wife, Dina. She's back here in the audience with my sons, Jacob and Grayson. They're 20 and 16. So I'm prepared to move my family. I actually came in early yesterday, and the wife wanted to go and look at neighborhoods and houses. So I got a little tired of riding around in the car yesterday, but we saw a lot of interesting things. My oldest son is actually already a member of the Winston-Salem community. He's a rising junior at Wake Forest. Go Deeks. I know we have lots of schools here, and I'm going to love and support all of them. But when we talk about family and community, a community is a larger family. And what I'm really looking to do when I move into this position is look at ways to really strengthen the relationships with the community. And one of the first things that I plan on doing is establishing a Chiefs Community Policing Advisory Committee that will meet on a regular basis. Probably in the beginning, I'm hoping that people will be willing to meet as much as I would like to. I'm looking to really include neighborhood leaders, faith-based leaders, NAACP, ACLU, members of the Hispanic community, LGBTQ. It's really easy for me to gather around a group of people that always agree with me, but that's not a way for me or the department to grow. Really want to have input. It's very important that the community has a say in how your police department functions and how your police department runs, because ultimately this police department belongs to the community of Winston-Salem. It's very important that this department is a part of and not apart from the community. I have 4 things that are really important to me in regards to running a police department: engagement, both internal and external; transparency and accountability, that actually counts as number 2; analysis; and then urgency. So real quick, the engagement, it goes back to what I was saying about establishing a committee from the community that's going to help me guide the direction that the police department takes. I'm ultimately responsible. I am ready and willing to take that responsibility on, but it would be foolish of me to think I could do it without input from the people that are affected and impacted by the actions the department takes. I would also look to expand that type of relationship into each district. Each district captain would be expected to have a neighborhood advisory group that's going to have some input on what the priorities are in those divisions and what those officers are working on. When I talk about transparency and accountability, and just in full interest of letting everybody know, I've already discussed this with Mr. Garrity and Mr. Page. As a candidate, I was trying to research some information on the city and the police department, and I had some trouble looking at the website. I would really want to make sure that we clean that website up, get some information out there. For me, with my history in internal affairs, I always want to know what are the rules that are set in place. And I think you have a right to know what the rules that are set in place for your police department, for your police officers are. I couldn't really find those. That's not something that we should be hiding. That's something that I would want to change immediately. As far as analysis goes, that goes with crime fighting and then analyzing the type of work that we do. So it's not only crime fighting, making sure that we're putting officers in the place where they are most needed to address crime problems that affect people's safety and feeling of safety, but also measuring the type of work that our officers do and make sure that we're looking for positive relationship building efforts with the community, measuring more than just the standard how many arrests somebody makes, how many tickets they write. We've moved beyond that. We really need to make sure that we're measuring the types of engagement that we have. And then urgency. Urgency to me means it may be the 10th call I as a police officer have answered this day. It may be the first time you've ever called 911. And how quick we respond and how responsive we are to you is important. How quick we're able to bring a case to closure is going to do a lot to diminishing fear of crime in the community. My goal is to make people safer than they were yesterday, and I want to make them feel safer than they did yesterday. Again, thank you so much for coming out today. I really appreciate the turnout, and I look forward to the questions. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Katrina Thompson, Assistant Chief with your Winston-Salem Police Department. I have been a member of our police department for a little over 23 years, and I've had the opportunity to work in a variety of different communities and different departments within the police department. I started my career here with the police department in January of 1994. I was one of 20 class members, and the only female, by the way. I will say that my leadership abilities showed through immediately, as my BLET class, or Basic Law Enforcement Training class members, elected me to represent our class as their class president. Since that time, I have exercised and used my leadership abilities throughout the agency and within the community. My years of experience in the city with this agency, in this city, with this agency has offered me the opportunity to be able to offer the leadership, the courage, the commitment, the drive, the initiative, and the experiences that the chief of the Winston-Salem Police Department deserves or should have, and that the citizens and employees of Winston-Salem and the Winston-Salem Police Department deserve. I bring that leadership to the next level as your police chief, and we will continue to work on building our relationships and improving public trust. I have had the opportunity to be right in the middle of some very, very tough situations here in Winston-Salem. Some of the community members sitting right here in this room have seen firsthand my ability to lead and to keep our community safe and calm when chaos was knocking at our door. That type of leadership is what I intend to not only bring to the position as police chief, but also to ensure that I'm growing future leaders within our agency to be able to take us to that next level in years to come. I believe it is my duty, it's my responsibility. I also believe that our community deserves that. We have been through some very trying times and some very tough times. We in Winston-Salem is no different than any other law enforcement agency across the country. We experienced some picketing, we've experienced some peaceful protests, but what we have not had here in Winston are any riots. And we should be very proud as a community, and we're certainly proud as a police department to be able to say that. That is not just because. That is because of the work that we, and that's all of us in this room, along with your police department, has done to build bridges, to be transparent, and to break down walls. We'll continue to do that. Yes, we're going to have disagreements. That's what it's about. That's what makes us people. But we're going to be able to work through those challenges, work through those disagreements, and still come out on top, because that's who we are. We're a resilient community, a community that believes in holding each other accountable at every level, and that's what we should always do. I believe in advancing our community policing initiatives. As you all know, we've been involved in community policing since 1989 in Winston-Salem. And as the time, our community and society have evolved, so has our initiatives. I see some of you out there that I've been on community panels with, attended community forums with, been involved in community meetings with, where we've answered questions. We had some tough, passionate discussions, but at the end of the day, we were able to leave out with a plan to move forward. Sometimes that means the plan is agreeing to disagree, and that's okay too. That's what makes us the community of choice. I look forward to answering your future questions, and thank you again for being here.
I have, as I said earlier, I have a number of questions that I'll be asking. We're going to, and I don't think I announced the time. We'll be having this session until about 5:30. My first question, I think, is very relevant. Again, this was one sent in by a citizen in the last couple of days. Very relevant to what's going on in our country right now. So this first question I'm going to direct to Katrina, and then Cam will follow after she answers, and then we'll keep rotating around. So the first question is, in light of the current state of emergency in which our nation is facing violent racism, brutal bigotry, national terrorism by the alt-right, Nazis, and KKK, how would you bring the community together towards racial reconciliation?
Guys, this is nothing new. We have had different factions of racial tension in our community dating back for decades. There has been a lot of disagreement. There's been a lot of passionate discussion. But at the end of the day, this is our community and our family. As your police chief, I will work to continue to be transparent as an agency, to work through community meetings, forums, or whatever venue we find necessary to address any concerns or any misunderstandings. One thing you need to know about your police department is that we will always, always put public safety first. We want our community, our citizens, to know and to understand and to thoroughly believe that their safety and well-being is always at the heart of everything we do in law enforcement. So as Chief of Police, I think it's important that we, number one, send the message louder that we're not tolerating injustice, and that we will not participate in injustice. As a law enforcement agency, we have gone through a number of different training opportunities, including implicit bias. But we know that training is not enough. What's most important is that we make sure we have checks and balances in place to internally to make sure that we are getting to the bottom of any problems that may occur that looks like bias. But also, we want to make sure that our community know that we're ready. Whether you all know it or not, Winston-Salem, one of 2 communities in the state of North Carolina, just received a federal grant for $1.8 million. And that grant was to help us train and prepare for complex coordinated terrorist attacks. Ladies and gentlemen, we're ready, and we will continue to be ready because our training will never stop. As I said, our safety, our job is to make sure that you know your safety is always at the heart of everything we do. So we'll continue to work with our federal, state, and local agencies, our communities, our nonprofit organizations, and each other to ensure that we remain safe and that we don't tolerate disruption in our community.
You know, when you talk about the level of discourse in this country today, police departments often find themselves in the middle of those disputes. And that's where the police should be, is in the middle. We don't take sides. What we do is provide public safety, provide forums for people to exercise their First Amendment right, legally, lawfully. We also address behavior that crosses the line. Public safety is our business, but it's my intention to be everyone's chief and to make sure that those who feel they do not have a voice or their opinion is not met, or their expectations, are not met by the police department, have a voice within the department. That's one of the reasons that I spoke about having a chief's community policing external advisory committee, so that I hear it firsthand from neighborhood leaders, faith-based leaders, what they're seeing and what their opinions are about how we should be responding to these issues. You know, when you look at some of the things that are going on, you know, obviously that's referring to everything that's happened in Charlottesville. I'm personally disgusted by everything that I saw there. We as a nation, we as a people are better than that. One of the things we should be able to do is disagree, but disagree respectfully, and not with hate in our heart. I don't have hate in my heart for anybody. It's, like I said, it's my intention to be everyone's police chief. You know, from the police perspective, one of the things we need to do is when we address things like implicit bias, we also need to address the fact that historically the police department, law enforcement in general, has at times been put in a position to enforce unjust laws. We have to own that. I own it today. There's a lot about being a cop that I'm proud of. I love what I do, and I love the people that I get to work with every day. But there's a history we have to acknowledge, and I'm not proud of that history, and I want to overcome it. One of the things that I've experienced in my time is a very good program involved that's entitled Dismantling Racism, and it's having to do with educating police officers and actually other people. The classes I was in included members of the school system, members of local government, to really understand some of the historical issues that created some of the division that we're trying to overcome these days. The first part is acknowledging that it's there, acknowledging that we all have bias, but training is only part of it. You know, you can't train somebody's heart. If I don't know you, I'm going to make my own opinion of you based on what I see. We all do it every day. I'd be lying if I said I don't make snap judgments. Part of that is being a police officer. You're expected to make snap judgments sometimes for your own safety and the safety of those around you. What we need to do is put our officers in a position to engage with people who are different from them. That's where we're going to have the most success of breaking down some of these biases. I can't train that away. What I can do is put officers in a position to get to know people that are different from them, because once I know who you are and you know who I am, I'm no longer Chief Selvi. I'm Cam. You know that I have a wife and family that I go home with. I know you as James. I know that you have a family that you care about and love, and you have hopes and dreams just like I do. So to say we're going to train our way out of it, that's not enough. We have to make sure that we're engaging. And we need to make sure that when we set those expectations out for our officers, that's something that we measure. And that's something that we consider when we look at who is the right person to promote, who is the right person to move up in that organization. Because if we get the wrong people in the wrong positions, then that message it's not going to be conveyed. So I think the biggest thing the police department can do is look at those engagement opportunities and make sure that we're addressing it head on.
Okay. Next question. What is your vision on stopping or at least reducing the gun violence that's taking the lives of so many?
Okay, I get that one first, right? You know, I believe that culturally, society we've got a big problem. There are too many people who have disagreements and they use violence to solve it. So what we need to do is look at what opportunities do we have in the school system, what opportunities do we have to educate people about the danger of just guns in general. I know there's a program in Fayetteville that I'm very interested in bringing here, and it's really focused in the middle schools, and it deals with gun violence. And the thing that really surprised me is some of the information I read from that is just how many of those middle school students talked about how easy it was for them to get a firearm. And what disturbed me even more than that, if that's possible, is how many of them that were able to say that they had actually been shot at. That's unconscionable to me. So I think we need to start our programs with our young folks and give them some options for de-escalation and give them some ways to deal with, it's hard to be a teenager these days. I mean, it was always hard. Believe me, I do remember. I know it looks like it's been a long time since I was a teenager, but you've got all the hormones going, and now with all the information that just flows at all of us at an ungodly rate, and then teens are affected even more so. From my experience, a lot of our gun violence is driven by young folks. So being able to partner with the school system and provide some education and provide them some other alternatives. I think the police department's role is twofold. One of my initiatives will be a youth advisory committee for the chief of police to meet with high school students, talk about concerns that they have. That will also be pushed down to the school resource officers in the schools. They're going to be expected to have a youth advisory committee so they can really establish those relationships, and hopefully when we have those relationships in place, these kids know when somebody's going to have a fight. They know when things are bubbling up. If they can establish a relationship with their SRO, establish a relationship with the police department, they're not going to be as afraid to come forward once we have a good, solid relationship and give us an opportunity to intervene and look at some other options to address that. So I think that our big focus is kids. That's not to get away from enforcement. We have federal partners we can work with, and when we have someone who is a repeat offender or a convicted felon who's walking around with a firearm, we need to make sure we hold them accountable. We have to work with our partners with the district attorney's office. At times we can work with our partners on the federal level. I know from personal experience, I was involved in an incident long time ago, 2000, and I was involved in a shooting with a convicted felon who was a habitual rape suspect. Unfortunately, he got more time for possessing a weapon by a convicted felon in the federal system than he would have gotten for shooting, and I actually still have the pellet in my hand for shooting me and attempting to shoot my partner that night. So there's other options out there, and I think it's just a matter, it's going to be a multi-pronged approach. We're going to have to look at the enforcement option for people who insist on using firearms, especially those convicted felons out there. But more importantly to me is really engaging with the youth and addressing that type of behavior beforehand and giving them some other options to be able to deal with arguments among themselves.
Thank you. I think what Commander Selvi was talking about was what we call here in Winston the Violent Crimes Task Force and the chronic offenders programs that we have been involved in for years. With both those programs, we've developed strong working relationships with our community organizations to include the Urban League, Goodwill, and our faith-based organization, as well as our Forsyth County District Attorney's Office, the U.S. Attorney's Office, and then our neighboring law enforcement agencies here. And we work together to make sure that we are addressing the violent criminal offenders that we've identified, not just in Winston-Salem, but in our region, because we all know that while the Winston-Salem Police Department will have jurisdictional lines, criminals do not respect those lines. So we work together with those different law enforcement agencies and community groups to not only be very tough on dealing with the offender once they come into the system and become a chronic offender, but also to, on the front end, try and provide some resources. A lot of times, crime comes from a systemic problem. We're talking poverty. We're talking low education, low unemployment, or unemployment. So when we're talking about dealing with crime, it's more than just the actual action that happened. As a law enforcement agency, as a community, we got to be committed to dealing with some of the real issues that cause crime. Again, education, unemployment, and empowerment. Some people, a lot of our violent crime comes from, manifests themselves in the form of domestic violence. We're living in a time where people are always on an electronic device. No one is talking to each other anymore. We're communicating to people in our families, sometimes in the exact same room, sitting right next to each other, using an electronic device. We've gotten away from sitting down and having meaningful discussions with people. That's kind of the heart of where we are. What we need to do, some of the root of our problem, is really touching the hearts and minds of people. We're living in a time where a lot of our young people don't respect human life. That's a scary, scary fact. But those are the times we're living in. So gun violence is not just a public safety or a police problem. It's a community problem. And it stems and occurs, it manifests itself long before the actual incident occur. I definitely agree that we have a responsibility to the youth in our community. Because if we're talking about being a thriving community, just as I'm talking about preparing law enforcement leaders to take on the agency and take our community to the next level, we've got to have that same commitment to the juveniles and to the youth in our community, to give them the opportunity, to give them the options, to give them the courage and the hope that there are things beyond their neighborhoods. And that's all neighborhoods. We need to be able to travel our children. We need to be able to expose our children. Fortunately, I'm a member of Callidium, the board of Callidium, a museum in Winston-Salem. That's our children's museum, and our science museum together. Callidium is about teaching children how to reimagine creativity. Those are the types of things we need to start exposing our children to. As your police chief, I will be part of a group working with other community leaders to redefine the generation equation for a lot of youth in our community whose life challenges stand in the way of their road to success. That's my commitment. But understanding that when we're talking about gun violence, we're talking about more than just a single act. We're talking about the manifestation of a lot of different things that come along throughout the individual's lives. We've got to learn how to be effective in our initiatives with empowering and educating victims of domestic violence, that they could break free and break the cycle of violence. I joined Judge Menifee in San Diego a couple years ago, where we're trying to enhance our skills here in Forsyth County in terms of dealing with that very issue on all sides. Also, working with family services to give the offenders another option, another opportunity. Working with timeout and different anger management type programs to also give them the opportunity to change their ways of crime and violence. Those are the types of things we've got to look at and not just focus on the actual incident. And again, I have to remind us, we're all family here. It's not just a law enforcement issue. It's a community issue, and I'm asking you to join me as your chief to address those issues.
Okay. Next question. What is your position on discretionary arrest for failure to produce an ID during traffic violations? And are you prepared to order officers to accept alternative IDs, such as the Faith Action ID, for undocumented immigrants who face risk of deportation as a consequence of these kinds of arrests?
So the Winston-Salem Police Department, we stopped several years ago doing checkpoints and stationary license checks, with the exceptions of working with the North Carolina Highway Safety Patrol as it pertains to our DWI, driving while impaired, license checks or checkpoints. So from that standpoint, in terms of transparency and fairness, we've really gotten away from that type of practice. Also, we have made our officers and our agency accountable to our community by having a data collection form. So every officer that's involved in conducting a traffic stop here in Winston-Salem is required to complete immediately a data collection form. And that form includes information like the race and gender of the individual who was stopped, what they were stopped for, and that type of thing. And that is for the sole purposes of showing that we are being transparent and fair in what we're doing. Now, we understand that if the traffic stops, if you're talking about an officer who's conducting traffic stops in a predominantly white area, then obviously the majority of the traffic stops are going to be with white residents. Same thing if it's in a predominantly African American community. The majority of those traffic stops are going to be African Americans. And that goes on to the different communities. But that's merely because of where the officer is working. Overall, as an agency, when we're talking about traffic stops, we are accountable and transparent with releasing that information when necessary. As it pertains to accepting, I think you were saying accepting alternative forms of identification, Winston-Salem is not in the business of asking any of our residents or visitors about their immigration status. That's not our job. We don't have the resources, nor do we have the time to do that. We're about making sure that all of our citizens and our visitors are safe, and if there is an issue where we have to deal with any type of law breaking, we enforce the law evenly and fairly across the board as it pertains to any type of law or any type of violation. In the past, there's been some discussion in our community about alternative identification. At this point, we cannot accept anything other than a driver's license when it comes to dealing with issues related to traffic. So if you're out driving and you don't have a driver's license, as a law enforcement officer, if you get stopped, then we have to follow the law. We have to abide by the law.
I would never shut the door on any alternatives in recognition of the fact that people fight and struggle to get to the country that a lot of us were fortunate enough to be born into. There's a reason that people come here, because they believe there's room for opportunity. There's a chance for them to find a better life, to provide for their family. I agree. I'm not the immigration police. That's a federal issue. What I'm concerned about is a safe Winston-Salem. And I believe we have a safe Winston-Salem when we have good relationships with all members of our community. So, if there are people, and I believe the question was speaking directly towards people who may be undocumented, my concern, and from my experience, is if we have a section of our population that does not feel comfortable coming to the police for any reason, that makes that segment of the population ripe for victimization. Because if I don't feel like I can come to you to report a crime, people are going to take advantage of that. And that's the last thing I want. That's not why I took the job of police officer 26 years ago. As corny as it sounds today to say, I took this job because I want to help people. I really don't care where you're from. I really don't care what you have in your background, what you believe. If I can help you, I'm going to help you. Are we going to address illegal behavior? Yes, of course we're going to address illegal behavior. When it comes down to driving, officers have discretion. There are other ways to establish who somebody is. It doesn't mean that the officer doesn't take an enforcement action, but just merely being stopped without having a driver's license on you is not something that you have to go to jail for. If so, then they would have gotten me once or twice, because I'm human. I've left my wallet at home. So my main concern when we deal with something like this, yes, I'm open to alternative forms, but I am restricted in what I can do. Chief of police is not king. So chief of police is here to make sure that we enforce the law. Can't necessarily make up my own, and we can't pick and choose what we enforce. What we can pick and choose is how we enforce and how we deal with members of the public who may feel disenfranchised. So that goes back to making sure that our officers are engaged and talking to people and behaving in a way that is procedurally just. I want to make sure that we treat everybody with dignity and respect. I want to make sure that we give people a voice in their encounters with the police department. And I want to convey trustworthy motives. Are we going to enforce the law? Of course we're going to enforce the law. But we need to make sure that some of our communities who may not feel comfortable coming to the police department, that we're not taking actions to further that belief and create even more of a divide.
Okay, I have two more questions, and I'm going to ask each of our candidates to limit their response to those to 1.5 minutes so that we can then have questions from the audience. The first question I have is, and this will be for Cam, our family is part of the law enforcement family of Winston-Salem. Despite being a part of the department for almost a decade, we struggle with feeling like officers in the department are often treated as underappreciated and expendable. How will you address the cultural dynamic within the department?
That's kind of been a common theme. Let me make sure I got my time right. That's kind of been a common theme forever. Cops often feel that way. Organizationally, my intention is much like I'm engaging internally. I mentioned earlier engagement, internal and external, is something that's very important to me. I'm going to engage internal just like I'm going to engage externally. And by that I mean I will have an internal advisory committee that will be a rotating group of officers and non-sworn from all over the department to be able to really have a voice in the department. I will make sure that I treat everyone with dignity and respect, because the best bosses I ever worked for were the ones that listened to me. They may not have always agreed, but they gave me a voice and let me say my piece. And that's how I manage people, and that's how I'll manage this police department. Did I do okay? Okay, good.
1 minute.
I think inclusion has a lot to do with it. A lot of times our officers believe that they're not involved in processes. They're not involved in decision makings. And as I had mentioned to our officers earlier, in terms of being asked about a vision for the police department, I am one of 700 and something employees. It would not be fair for me just to arbitrarily and within a vacuum make a vision for all the employees. I believe in inclusion, and with that I mean getting employees involved in decision making, getting employees involved in direction, and in our vision. I believe that once we do that, employees then have a feeling like they are stakeholders in decision making and in the directions that we're going in, and that's something we need to always be conscious of. So for me, I believe in a unified vision, but also in terms of culture, I think it's about open communication. We have to be honest, we have to be real with each other. People who know me know that I'm approachable. I'm not a difficult person to talk to, and in fact, that's when I'm the most comfortable. I like knowing both good and bad, what we can do better, what we're doing good with, where are the changes that we can make. And so talking to the officers that are directly involved and our non-sworn civilian employees that are directly involved with having their feet on the ground and making those interactions, and those people who the decisions and policies are made for directly affect, I think that has a lot to do with changing the feeling that they are left out of the culture.
Earlier this year, a viral video showed a Winston-Salem police officer arresting a 24-year-old African-American woman after a controversial and emotional encounter during a routine traffic stop. Do you believe police officers can do more to de-escalate these types of situations? And if so, what specifically would you do to promote these tactics in our city?
So I'm very familiar with that situation. I'm very familiar with the incident and how we dealt with it with our agency. I believe that we as a police department, we have an obligation to be fair and to enforce the laws within the amount of reasonableness that's necessary. What I will tell you all, if you all are familiar with that situation, is that our officer did what he was supposed to do when he was supposed to do it. I think that's important that you know. Unfortunately, the citizen who captured the video captured a portion of the video that on its face looked like we were being aggressive and unreasonable. If you had the opportunity to see the whole video, you will see that the officer followed the procedure of doing traffic stops almost textbook. And so just like the expectation is that the citizens and ourselves, that we hold ourselves accountable and that you hold us accountable, we have to always remember that there is a certain amount of responsibility that our communities share as well. We have an obligation to make sure that we're doing what we're supposed to do. Now, don't get me wrong. I've been stopped by the police before. There were times when I knew I was wrong when I was stopped. There were times when I felt like I wasn't wrong. But at the end of the day, what it is not to do, the time to fight or disagree with the law enforcement officer is not on the side of the road or in the middle of a traffic stop. I think it is my obligation to make sure my community is safe. And so with that, I'm going to take this opportunity to just stress the education that we've been trying to stress when it comes to that. We have checks and balances in place. We have an internal complaint process in place that includes, if you're not satisfied with the actions that our police chief finalized, then it can go another step, and that's with our Citizens Review Board. I think that when you as a citizen encounter a situation on the highway, on the side of the road, with a police officer, you may not agree, but here's what I want you to understand. You need to go along with what's being done in terms of a safe traffic stop. It's our responsibility and our goal to make sure that you are safe, just like we want to be safe as officers. And then immediately, contact the supervisor, contact someone within our professional standards division, and we will not ignore any complaints of any type, no matter how small you believe they might be or how large you know they are. It's utterly important that you remember the complaint process and that you follow that to remain safe on the side of the road. And I know I went over my time.
Had a lot of passion in that one. That was good. When we talk about de-escalation, de-escalation is the responsibility of the police officer and the police department. It's not the responsibility of the citizen. We expect our folks to be trained. Too often, when you see some of these videos, like she said, and I watched the information about that video, I watched the news conference, I've seen the footage, and we've had similar issues in my department where you get a small portion of the incident. But I think what's really important here to remember is not who films it, not what the overall outcome is. What are we training our police officers to do when they encounter somebody? If I go on a domestic call, am I going to escalate that situation? Am I going to make that worse? Policing is an art. It's not a science. So I can't give you a formula that guarantees every time it's going to go the right way, because we're dealing with people and we're dealing with emotion. And what we need to make sure that we're doing is providing some scenario-based training for our officers to put them in high-stress situations that are in controlled environments. We've done that in the past at my agency, and I've seen great success with that. I would much rather see somebody handle a traffic stop poorly at the training academy, and where we can call a timeout and we can learn from it, and officers can begin to recognize things in themselves that may cause them to respond inappropriately or may cause them to unnecessarily escalate a situation. So I think the onus for de-escalation always lies on the police department. We're the ones that are providing the training. We're the ones in traffic stops. We're instigating the contact because we're choosing to take an enforcement action. So I think we owe it to not only the community to make sure that our officers are trained that way, but we owe it to our officers. I don't know of anybody who wants to have a viral video of themselves go up and negatively reflect themselves or their police department. So I think training is a big issue with that.
All right, we are now ready for questions from the public. So, yes, sir. Would you like to ask a question?
All right. Yes, sir. I may not be able to stand the whole time.
That's fine.
But
You don't have to stand at all.
my name is Larry Wamble. I'm a resident of the city of Winston-Salem. And to be fair to you all, I used to serve on this city council right there in that seat there. And so now we've turned it over to the capable hands of Mr. Taylor, who is the city council from our area and is doing a fantastic job, and I'm glad to be here for that. The person that's helping me is my assistant. Since I used to be on the city council, back then they called it the Board of Aldermen, city council, I was involved in choosing one of the police chiefs that we had here in the city of Winston-Salem. I think overall we have a pretty good department, but there's always concerns to make it better. None of us are perfect. And so my question is, and in case I'm not here for the entire duration, I do have another appointment, but I do want to get this out to everybody. Everybody's talking about catching people. But I believe one of the best things is to try to prevent it in the first place. Mm-hmm. If we can prevent a lot of crime and a lot of law breaking, that goes a long way. My mother used to tell me an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So if we can do that, and I haven't heard y'all speak on actually preventing crime here in the city of Winston-Salem, and also about how are you going to involve citizens. Every police chief tells the same thing. We're going to involve citizens, and very seldom does that actually happen in a very meaningful and a very constructive way. And the second part of my question, and I'll sit down then, is that we have a lot of vacancies in this police department. There are 500 and some sworn officers. Out of those 500 and some sworn officers, we are not up to par. So what are we going to do about filling those vacancies? And then once they get here, how can we entice them to stay? So that's involving recruitment and also retention of good officers here in the city of Winston-Salem. And tantamount to that is involving our minority community in a very meaningful way into the running of the city of Winston-Salem. Relationships is a very important part. And if you don't have the cooperation of the citizens, no matter how good your police department, it's not going to be effective. Thank you so very much for allowing this public forum.
Thank you, sir. So, two questions. We have two questions, so everyone hold on. We'll get to these. So, the first one is methods for prevention.
Right.
And the second is reducing turnover in the department.
Okay. As far as prevention, one of the things that I aim to look at is, as I mentioned earlier, how are we engaging with the youth in the schools? What kind of tools are we giving them to come up with other alternatives as opposed to violence to deal with problems? One of the initiatives that I did in my police department was changed our police athletic league to a police activities league. And not every kid wants to play sports. Want to give some other options out there, really pull in the recreation and parks department, find out facilities that are available, get them plugged in with mentors. We've got 3 fine universities here that we could partner with, that I would love to partner with, to come up with programs specifically aimed towards youth as far as prevention goes. And you're right, relationship building is key. I think that was a portion of your question, is how are we going to engage the citizens? I thought I had mentioned it earlier. If I hadn't, I apologize. I will be immediately establishing a Chiefs Community Policing Advisory Committee that will meet on a regular basis with me. Probably in the beginning, I'm hoping that people want to meet as much as I do, to pull in people from all over the city, all different backgrounds, faith-based leaders, NAACP, ACLU, LGBTQ. It's real easy for me to get a group of people that are like me and think like me and tell me the exact same thing, and hey, go team, we all agree. But that's not life, and that's not representative of everybody in this community. So I'm really looking to pull in as many people as possible to help have some input on this. One of the things that I looked at in my research was looking at the mission statement for the Winston-Salem Police Department. And it's great. It's a great mission statement. I'm not sure that we haven't hit a time where maybe we need to look at adjusting that, and any adjustment that would be made would be in consultation and including members of the community to have a voice in what that mission statement is, because this police department is your police department, and we are definitely a part of the community. And I neglected to say this earlier. Thank you for your service on this dais earlier. I appreciate that. And as far as recruiting and retention, huge problem, huge issue all over. We need to be very creative with how we look at recruiting. one of the things that I've heard a lot of times, it's the time it takes for someone to move through the recruiting process and the hiring process. Are there things we're doing to slow that process down that we could speed it up so we don't lose good candidates to other organizations? Also, part of that, are there disqualifiers that maybe aren't appropriate in this day and time? It used to be if there was a credit blemish of some sort, that would be enough to knock somebody out. Well, given the way the economy has seesawed over the past several years, that may not be an accurate representation of something that should be a disqualifier. So we need to look at what barriers have we put up to employment, and how can we adjust those so that we can really open up employment to more people. When you talk about looking at minority hiring, we want to make sure we're reflective of our community, and there's a lot of places to go for that. I think every agency is always aware of that. Historic black colleges and universities is obviously a great place to start, expanding our reach. I found out recently that I believe it was Fort Bragg, they have a section where people leave the service and they're being transitioned out. And the number one employer that has representation at that particular part of the base is the Los Angeles Police Department. That just made me mad, because they're right here. It should be local departments that are really looking to pull those people in. As far as retention, then we're getting into, and from your time sitting up here, we're getting into budget issues, and budget is always touchy. I know that there's been a lot of support from the Public Safety Committee in trying to help the officers. We need to make sure we're doing some really good exit interviews on the folks who are leaving and find out exactly what is the cause for that, so that we can try to remedy it. We want to make sure that there's parity with other cities. I know some of the sneaky things that are coming down the road, and I say that partly tongue-in-cheek, from some other agencies of ideas they have to try to get officers who work a couple of years in one spot and they're looking to poach them away. We need to make sure that we're guarding against that moving forward. So I think I hit everything that you were interested in: prevention, community inclusion, and recruitment and retention.
Right.
Is that good?
Yes.
Okay.
And especially this department is lacking in minority representation.
I understand.
Not only minorities, but females too. We need females in this department too.
Yes, sir.
But you did hit most of them.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Womble. I think I would be remiss if I didn't say that Mr. Womble was being modest in his service to our community. He was not only a city council member here in Winston-Salem, he was also a representative, and so he has represented our community and served our community on different levels for years. And the fact that he's here tonight is a testament to his dedication still to our community. So thank you for that, sir. To answer your questions further, in terms of relationship building and how to involve citizens in terms of relationships and decision makings, and I will also get to recruiting and retention as well. The Winston-Salem Police Department has been involved in a lot of different initiatives, and we call that kind of the soft sides of policing. And by that I mean some of you in this audience have been to some of our Coffee with a Cop initiatives, some of our community forums. You've attended some of our open house Christmas programs at the police department. We've had Stuff the Patrol Car and a number of different initiatives that are strictly designed to build trust, confidence, and break down barriers in our community. During those opportunities, we take the time to talk to our citizens and ask questions. And some of our citizens, Ms. Reed, we don't have to ask. They're more than willing to come and tell us, basically letting us know things that we can do to make changes and make adjustments and make our community better and our police department stronger. We will continue to do those things as time and our community evolve. Our initiatives will evolve, but we will also get involved in listening to ideas from the citizens on a more intentional basis. So what that looks like is having different community events set up for the sole purposes of receiving information from our community. We have really, really stretched and exhausted as much as we possibly can the recruiting market in North Carolina. You just heard Commander Selvi talk about Los Angeles here, actually trying to recruit from our military bases. It's the same pool of people we're trying to recruit from. So we have taken our recruiting. We will continue to recruit right here in Winston-Salem, and thanks to our progressive city council, we have now have the military incentive that will help us when it comes to recruiting at our military bases. But we're interested in hearing from you some ideas, because we are constantly talking to each other. We are constantly researching and talking to other agencies, not just law enforcement agencies. We're talking about other businesses. How do you go about recruiting? What are some of your recruiting strategies that we can use? We're all about being creative and innovative to get the best employees here in our agency.
May I offer you one suggestion?
Yes.
Go into these churches. You can find a lot of people unemployed in the church. Go into these churches and sororities and fraternities. You might find some people that are willing to work on the police department if you go into these churches and let them know you want them to come and fill this vacancy.
Yes, sir. I appreciate that. And I'll just tell you, and there's some of my faith-based leaders in here can attest to the fact that we've reached out to the churches. As you know, Chief Roundtree is a member of a fraternity, and so he's reached out to the Greek population to try to solicit good qualified candidates. You know, every once in a while we can bring in one, and we'll continue to try and do those things. But I appreciate your zeal and your vigorness, and so do the other employees in the department, because the vacancies aren't just within the police positions. They're in our civilian positions as well. So we're always looking for creative, innovative ways, and I'm going to stay in touch with you to see if you can provide us some more of those methods. But also in terms of building relationships, one of the other things I think it's important to mention that we have a cadet program, we have an explorer program. We also have the Police Foundation that is working with us and trying to help be creative with ideas and things that we can do to kind of develop people and get them involved as young teenagers, get them involved in volunteering and doing different work with our community resource unit in the whole idea of grooming them, or with the whole idea of grooming them to be police officers.
Okay. Yes, sir. You in the middle. Yell it. Yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
Yes, speak to the microphone, sir, so that we can have it captured.
Okay.
Could you walk up to the front, please?
Can you come around here, sir?
Yes, I just want to tell y'all about an experience that I had here in Winston-Salem. When I first came here, I was very happy to come to this city. I had just got promoted. I'm pulling a U-Haul truck with my car behind it, trying to find a place called Country Club Road. And I'm going down a one-way street. Police officers pulled me over. This police officer was named Mickey Hutchison. Mickey looked at all my information, never did give me a ticket, but he did show me the right way to go. And me and Mickey Hutchison became friends. Little did I know, a few years later, Mickey Hutchison would lose his life in doing his job, doing his duty. And me and him used to talk about something, and that's why I'm here. We used to always talk about deterrent and how to, work to try to stop crime and everything. And me and him used to always talk about surveillance cameras throughout the city and all the neighborhoods, and how that would be a deterrent. And I have talked to the city councilman about it here. I have talked to the police chief about it here. And I wonder what y'all two think about it. And I do know that there is some grants out there. And I think this would be a deterrent to our city. What do you think about that?
Thank you, sir.
Actually, I think it's Katrina's
Oh,
turn
okay.
this time.
Perfect.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding your question. You're asking about the cameras in the community?
Yes, cameras in the community. Starting with the police surveillance cameras is a good start. But put them in the community. Look, once I walk outside my door, my privacy's over. I'm in the public domain. And people need to understand that. And and as long as I consider myself a law-abiding citizen, I'm following the law. I'm not that good looking, but you can take my picture. You know what I'm saying? And I think it's a deterrent. I really do. Just look at the incident in Boston at the marathon. Without those cameras, they'd never got them. You see what I'm saying? And it's not so much about punishing folks as it is a deterrent. Some of them should be clearly exposed. Let them know where they're at. And some shouldn't be. And just as good as the body cams on our police officers, we should do all our neighborhoods. Because gun violence, even in this city, is probably going to be a record, or close to it. So I just want to know what y'all think about that. And will y'all actively go and get grants to do this? Like I said, I talked to the city council. I talked to Police Chief Roundtree about it. And I tell you, me and my friend Mickey used to talk about it all the time. And he was a good friend of mine. I tell you what, it's funny. It's okay to hear about a policeman losing his life on the news. But when you know one, and you know him personally, it's a different story. And those guys go out there every day trying to do their job. And all they want to do is go home at night to their families, just like I want to go home to mine.
Thank you,
So
sir.
what do you think about that?
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and I really appreciate you sharing the comments about Sergeant Mickey Hutchins. As you know, he paid the ultimate sacrifice for our community. So to get to your question about cameras, if you've had a conversation with Chief Roundtree, then you may be familiar with the fact that we are working on a downtown camera project with the intent on the cameras kind of spreading out. I have to say that there's a delicate balance between using the cameras and making sure it's deterring crime and for public safety, and helping our community understand that this isn't another arm of Big Brother watching. So we're very sensitive when it comes to camera and camera initiatives. But as far as looking at cameras as an option, we're already there. And we've already had conversations also with some of our public and private organizations in the city who would be willing to sign on. They are businesses and organizations who may have cameras and would allow us to tap into their cameras as well. So that would be a way for us to have access to even more camera views. But that is something that I definitely agree is a strategy for deterring crime, and it's one that we have explored and we continue to work on.
I also want to say thank you for honoring Sergeant Hutchins by your comments today. That was very nice. As far as cameras go, I love some cameras. I've watched the benefit at Charlotte with our real-time crime center, and that is staffed 20 hours a day. And some of that money did come from grants. I love grants because especially the grants I'm looking for are the ones that don't require us to match any funds. We just have to show the work, and I'm definitely not against that. I believe that cameras can really be a force multiplier for us, and the benefits can be deterrent. They can also be investigative. Every homicide that occurs outside that I've responded to over the past several years, one of the first things that the detectives are doing is, when they brief and talk about everything, is immediately start going around and checking businesses for cameras to see what kind of evidence we can get. And we get some really good evidence from those cameras. Along that line is looking at grants when we talk about that's obviously evidence gathering, but when we're thinking about deterrent, you look at license plate readers. We've had some success with those. When the license plate reader hits on a car that's stolen or is wanted for something, our real-time crime center is able to go up on cameras in partnership with the Department of Transportation, the Charlotte Department of Transportation, and some cameras with the state to be able to look real-time to track where suspects are traveling and then pull in officers and start giving some directions, really bringing all those resources together. So, yes, to all of your questions, I love some grants and I love some cameras.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. In the blue. Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon, Katrina and Cam. Thank you so much for your service. Really appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you.
My name is Laura Spangler. I'm pastor at Lloyd Presbyterian Church, and we have a weekly city prayer time where we pray for police officers and law enforcement people. And so I know how difficult this job is because you're dealing with a lot of crime and very violent situations. And I wanted to ask you, so what kind of personal belief and faith resources do you have in order to cope with all the difficulties that you have to deal with?
All right. Well, that I normally don't I don't witness at work because that's not acceptable necessarily when I'm in uniform. I was raised Presbyterian, and please forgive me, Pastor, but I'm Southern Baptist now, so please don't judge me. So that's why sitting in the front's a little weird for me right now. Good Southern Baptist sits in the back. I have my faith in God, and I have my family. I said this earlier in the police forum. This isn't only my career; it's their career, because they worry every day. I've given my wife reason to worry. I've called her. I mentioned earlier I was involved in an incident. I went to work Mother's Day night, and 2 o'clock in the morning, Monday morning, I'm calling her and waking her up. She's at home. My 20-year-old was 3, and she was pregnant with that other knucklehead sitting over there. And, that was very hard. But without the support of my family and my friends, there's no way I could do this job. And I'll tell you, today, we were together this morning before I left to go to the public forum. And regardless of how great a day today has been and all the wonderful people that I've met, the absolute high point for me was my 20-year-old son, wrapping his arms around me and praying for me to have a successful day. At the end of everything, I'm a husband and a father first. I'm a police officer third. And it's very important to me, but without my family, there's no way that I could deal with it. And I've seen some really lousy things in my time. But I've been blessed because I have really good friends, I have a good faith, and I have a wife that I could not live without.
Thank you for the question, Ms. Spangler. But God, I know if it had not been for the praying grandmother that I had, and for ensuring that my faith was strong regardless of what we were going through. My mother let me know that with God, all things are possible. I tell you, I grew up inner city Detroit, where I witnessed crime, so much crime, on so many different levels as a young child till I thought it was normal. And that's why I know that but God, I couldn't be here. It is also why I know that we have a responsibility in this community to the young people here to let them know that they can overcome the challenges, but they got to believe in themselves and a power greater than themselves and do the best they can and don't worry about the rest.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon. My name is Dewana Hamlin. I'm a local advocate, content specialist, and trainer. And Assistant Chief Thompson, you related to this a little bit earlier, and feel free to expound on this. Commander Selvi, I'm interested in your ideas as well. Compared to surrounding communities this year, we've not seen intimate partner violence-related homicide as in years past here in Winston-Salem. What are some of your ideas that demonstrate your understanding of this complex issue requiring collaborative prevention and intervention efforts, inclusive of law enforcement response and legal remedies? Thank you.
Thank you, Dewana. We've worked together over the years on several issues and initiatives as it pertained to domestic violence. As I mentioned earlier, education and empowerment to both our victims to understand that they can break the cycle of violence. And we have the power as a community to educate them and give them the tools and the resources to understand that they could break free. But that isn't enough, because we still have an offender out there that's able to go on to the next person if our first victim was fortunate enough to believe in herself or himself and move on. So we've got to be holistic about how we deal with it. And that's from the beginning to the end. I go back to self-respect and respect of others. We've got to be able to respect human life and to respect one another. That's what's missing. When it comes to issues of domestic violence, I've already demonstrated my commitment to making sure that our agency is aggressive in raising awareness through a number of different initiatives. Some of you may have seen the patrol car that's been wrapped to raise awareness. That patrol car got so much attention till it's been asked to be brought to other communities for that purpose. We invested in silhouettes and silent witnesses here in Winston, just so that we can not forget, remember the victims in our own community that have lost their lives to violence. And we got to also remember the families that they leave behind. Some are children, some are mothers, some are siblings. Those are the types of things that when we lose an individual in our community to domestic violence, we got to be committed to making sure we provide the services to the family members that they leave behind. Some are left with raising children of the victims. And so we've got to provide that support. But education and empowerment is what's going to be the prevention that Mr. Womble was talking about on the front end.
My experience with investigating homicides involving intimate partners, very rarely have I seen one where there weren't previous offenses. We knew about that offense. And I take those bother me, because organizationally, where did we fail? You know, we can't, I'd love to say the police can prevent every crime. I'd love to say that, but we can't. What we can do is be aware of issues that are likely to become other crimes. And it's like you said, it's a multifaceted approach. I think that we have to bring in community partners. The police obviously can't do it all, but we're often the gatekeeper for that information. And we need to make sure that our relationships with external partners are strong enough that we can very quickly pull in some help for our victims, before it reaches the point of a homicide. We have, in Charlotte, I've got experience. Domestic violence is one of the units that I supervise, and we have domestic violence counselors that are non-sworn individuals who come in and have experience in the field, counseling, and also helping to direct people, help them work their way through the court system in some of those cases. Another thing that we also do, we started a program in partnership with Yale University back in 1997. I was in one of the patrol divisions that pioneered it for our department. It's called Child Development Community Policing. And what that entails is bringing in a counselor to any situation where a child has been exposed to violence in the home. And most often that's going to be domestic violence, because, you know, there's a cycle of violence. And if we don't take some initiative to those young people, to Katrina's point, she grew up thinking that some behavior was normal. So we have to make sure we're intervening with those children to let them know that's not the way you show somebody you love them. You know, a hand upside the head, that's not love, that's an assault, and you need to go to jail. Sometimes people just need to go to jail. And, you know, are we going to try to give those offenders counseling and make sure they don't hurt anybody else? Yes, but I think there's a really big message for somebody who's willing to put his hands on a woman. They just need to go to jail. So I'm sorry, I get a little passionate on that one. That just because that's something that we can prevent. And sometimes you just got to lock. I was about to say something else. Sometimes you just got to lock them up.
One last question. Yes, sir. Please come up to the podium.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I'm Bobby Wilson, and I'm very glad to meet you. Mr. Selvi, you're coming from the great city of Charlotte. I went to Johnson C. Smith, and I'm an alumnus. Bob Walton was my best friend.
Okay.
And Walton Plaza is an attestament to that. Young lady, you have the nicest name in the city. I won't say anything else. Okay. Okay, now with that being said, I'm interested in political pressure. It governs our interest in what the city is about. Are you and will you and can you be swayed by political pressure? I'm interested in the crime, as you say, your police. Black in America, from the Constitution of the United States, automatically make me a criminal. I want to read. I don't want to be a slave. All the things that the Constitution said made me a criminal. Here I am standing before you, well educated. And as my first name says, Bobby Wilson, the first English word for police, Bobby. So we can attest to how we think in this country. However, you will have an agenda that brings to our attention that political pressure sways you so much. If this person is a pain in the ass in our city, do something with him. All of these gentlemen back here can say I'm a pain in the ass because I'm always trying to get something from them. So I'm here to say that. So political pressure, please don't let that be a problem. Will it be?
Okay.
I question you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
You know, I have a little bit of experience with that. When I was a patrol captain, my patrol division actually provided police services not only to the city of Charlotte, to a section, but a town of Mint Hill. We had a contract to provide services to them. And all due respect to the fine council members in here tonight, that council was a little different. And this is the honest truth. The first week I was there, one of my sergeants came to me and said, "Hey, we got a problem." I said, "What's the problem?" He said, "Well, one of the guys on second shift wrote one of the town councilman's son a ticket." I said, "Okay, what's the problem?" "Well, he's upset. He wants us to do something about it." I said, "Well, did you give him directions to the courthouse?" And he said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "What are we going to do?" He's like, "Well, you know, we kind of try to take." I was like, No, that's not how we roll. I have utmost respect for the council members that are in here and the dedication that they put to serve in this community. I have confidence and because, you know, his organization in this city did some research on me. That's a two-way street. I did some research here too. I've not seen anything to make me believe that I would be put in a position by the council here to compromise my beliefs or what my mission is. district attorney's office has nothing to do with me. That they don't hire me. There's two gentlemen right there that I answer to. If I have a problem, then it's going to be, I'll address it with them. And if they have a problem with me, I'm going to tell you the same thing I tell my chief of police now. I'm going to do the right thing at the right time and for the right reasons. And I'm not going to compromise my beliefs. I'm not going to break the law. I'm not going to break policy. And I'm not going to do something that's immoral. So, my bosses have bosses. So it's going to have to roll really far downhill. And, a phrase that I get made fun of for using sometimes is that the hill you want to die on? If it comes down to it, I'm not going to compromise my beliefs or the integrity of this organization to bow to political pressure. I'm going to do the right thing. Katrina?
No, sorry, we don't have any more time for questions. Katrina is going to answer one more, and then we're going to give them each an opportunity to wrap up.
So we've just spent the last nearly hour and a half talking about integrity and talking about transparency and building bridges. We can't do that if the integrity isn't there, if the trust isn't there. Some of you may know that our police department has investigated traffic incidents, where we've had to write officials citations. The officials know that and understand that. We know that and understand that. That's what transparency is. We get no backlash from it. We deal with it just like anybody else, and all of that is public record. So it's not a secret. We're not about keeping secrets. Again, I have 2 children that depend on me to make sure that they get the same thing that my mother and my grandparents provided for me. I in no way would compromise their lives and their livelihood for political pressure. I'm about being honest. I can't be your police chief. I can't be your assistant chief if I can't be honest. And I certainly would not have gotten this far in my career compromising my integrity. I've not done it to this point, and I do not intend to do it.
I wish, I know.
Perdóname, señor, nadie habla nada sobre la comunidad hispánica. No one has said anything about our Spanish-speaking community.
We did ask questions about ID checks and ICE.
Yes, that was
so,
the only thing said.
well, I'm sorry, ma'am. We've used, ma'am, could I finish, please? You will have an opportunity. Each one of them is going to speak for the next 3 minutes and wrap up. You will have an opportunity to come and visit with them directly yourself if you'd like to do that. And they will stay after they've made their presentations, and you can ask them all the questions you'd like. If you would, we need to be respectful of everybody's time. And I think this time is Katrina's to start. So they're each going to give about a 2 to 3 minute wrap up.
Thank you. I want to start out by saying again, I appreciate your time. The fact that you're here tonight says that you are invested in the advancement and well-being of your community, that you are committed to making sure that the right person is in the right place to lead our department and our community forward in terms of a police chief. For that, I am eternally grateful. I have spent my entire career in law enforcement right here, proudly serving all of you and your families in Winston-Salem. I live here. My children were born here, and this is where I plan to be. It has been my honor, and it will continue to be my privilege to serve you in the law enforcement capacity. We have seen a number of things to occur here. I mentioned to our employees earlier today that during my career here, we have had four officers pay the ultimate sacrifice. Sergeant Mickey Hutchins was mentioned earlier. Officer Willingham was one. We've also had Steve Amos to lose his life during my tenure. And Sergeant Howard Pluff, who I spent the first 5 weeks of my career as a sworn officer riding in the car with, side by side, as he coached me on what it means to be a good, strong police officer in Winston-Salem. For that, I am deeply committed, and I will continue to serve you in the highest capacity, and I'm going to ask that you hold me and your department accountable. I say this as I close. Winston-Salem is my home, and the citizens of the city and employees of the department are members of my family, and nobody can protect my home or my family with the love, the passion, and the dedication that I can. Thank you.
All right, I also want to echo my thanks for you for taking the time out of your day to come and ask questions and meet us. Very impressed with the turnout. Am I from Winston-Salem? Nope. I'm from Charlotte. I grew up on the police department in Charlotte. I thought I grew up before I got there. I grew up as I became a police officer and then became a police executive. I may not be from here, but that doesn't mean I don't know the job. I've got 26 years of experience, and very broad experience at that. I know how to hold people accountable, as evidenced by 2 different tours in the Internal Affairs Unit, commanding that unit, and being responsible for holding a department of 1,800 plus sworn officers accountable, and then several hundred civilian employees. I believe that I bring a level of passion myself, a love for this department, a love for this profession, and my family is here with me tonight. You're getting the whole package. So I am fully prepared, and my family is fully in support of moving here and coming here by choice at a point in my life when I don't have to do that. I could very easily stay where I am, stick with what is known, and do my time. I am excited by the opportunity to come to Winston-Salem and meet new people and meet a new department and really take this department to the next level. This is the capstone of my career. I'm not looking to use this as a springboard to another position in another town. I want to retire from the Winston-Salem Police Department, and when I do, I will guarantee that the staff that is in place will be ready to fill that vacancy. Again, thank you very much for your time.
Tell you what, a tough decision. Who's good police officer? I'd hate to make that decision between you two.
You said it better than I could. That's exactly what I was going to say. You can see.